poisoned, shot, and thrown into an icy river, but he just wouldn't die. And a beloved filmmaker secretly frozen under Disneyland? These sound like movie plots, but they're actually famous historical myths that many people still believe. History is full of wild stories and exaggerated legends that warp our understanding of its most iconic figures. From propaganda-fueled tales to well-intentioned fables, these myths often stick in our minds more than the truth. Today, let's set the record straight on the craziest myths surrounding 7 hugely famous historical figures and discover the real facts behind the legends. Buckle up for a myth-busting ride through history's strangest stories. The myth. Everyone knows Napoleon Bonaparte was a tiny man with an oversized ego. So short, in fact, that his name inspired the term Napoleon Complex for aggressive short guys. British cartoonists in the 1800s happily caricatured the French emperor as Little Boney, a pint-sized tyrant throwing tantrums. The image of a diminutive Napoleon dwarfed by his big hat and boots has stuck in pop culture for centuries. The truth. In reality, Napoleon wasn't unusually short at all. He was pretty average in height. Historical evidence indicates Napoleon stood around 5 feet 6 or 5 feet 7 inches tall, or about 170 centimeters. That was actually slightly above the average Frenchman of his era. British propagandists like cartoonist James Gilray also played a huge role. They loved depicting Napoleon as comically small and ferocious to belittle him. In paintings and written descriptions by those who met him, Napoleon comes off as average height and solidly built. The enduring image of a pocket-sized emperor was essentially enemy propaganda and satire that took on a life of its own. So, Napoleon did have outsized ambition, but his physical height was nothing out of the ordinary. The little corporal wasn't literally little. Has Walt Disney been chilling out literally beneath Disneyland since 1966? One of the most bizarre modern legends claims that Walt Disney arranged to have his body, or just his head, cryogenically frozen upon his death, hoping to be revived in the future when medical science could cure his lung cancer. The story usually specifies that Disney's frozen remains were stored under the Pirates of the Caribbean ride at Disneyland, because where else would you keep a frozen visionary, right? This urban legend has been incredibly popular, whispered about for decades and often taken half seriously. It paints the picture of Disney as a secret futurist who made himself into a real-life Sleeping Beauty, awaiting resurrection. There's even a tongue-in-cheek theory that the Disney film Frozen got its title to distract Google search results from Disney Frozen inquiries about Walt's body. The truth. Despite how often this is repeated, there is absolutely no evidence Walt Disney was frozen. In fact, there's solid proof he wasn't. Walt Disney died on December 15, 1966, and his body was cremated 2 days later. He was interred at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California. Public records, including a death certificate and cemetery records, confirm this. His daughter Diane Disney Miller explicitly stated that to her knowledge, Walt had never even heard of cryonics. The cryogenic freezing rumor seems to have started in the late 1960s, possibly as a joke among Disney's animators that leaked to a tabloid newspaper in 1969. At the time of Disney's death, the idea of freezing bodies was a sci-fi notion just starting to enter public discussion. The first human cryonic preservation happened in 1967. Disney was indeed fascinated by futurism. He built Tomorrowland and Epcot, after all, which may have given the rumor a whiff of plausibility. But no credible source ever indicated Disney wanted to be frozen. On the contrary, his funeral was small and private, and he was quietly cremated, which was known to his family and inner circle. The Disney on Ice story persisted simply because it's a wild, fun idea that captures people's imagination. It's the ultimate modern myth, combining celebrity lore, pseudoscience, and our cultural obsession with cheating death. In reality, Walt Disney's legacy lives on through his films and theme parks, not a secret cryo chamber. So, unless someone finds Mr. Disney's body in a block of ice, we can file this myth under cool story, bro. Entertaining, but entirely untrue. Even Einstein failed math class. This comforting factoid is often trotted out to inspire struggling students. The legend says that as a boy, Albert Einstein was terrible at mathematics. Some versions claim he even failed a grade school math exam before miraculously becoming the genius who revolutionized physics. If true, it's the ultimate underdog story, a dunce-turned Nobel Prize winner. The truth. Sorry, my friends, but this one is pure myth. Einstein was actually a math whiz from a young age. School records and biographical research show he excelled in math and science, earning top grades. "I never failed in mathematics," Einstein himself flatly stated when asked about this rumor. In fact, by age 15, he had already mastered advanced calculus. So where did the idea of him flunking math come from? Historians suspect a mix of misinterpreted grading scales and decades of hearsay. In reality, Einstein did struggle briefly with some non-science subjects and failed an entrance exam, largely due to the language and history sections, not math. But in mathematics, he was consistently brilliant. The true lesson isn't that anyone can be Einstein even if you fail math. It's that even geniuses attract myths. The real Einstein story shows a gifted student who had some rebellious, independent streaks, but absolutely dominated math class. American folklore loves the story of young George Washington chopping down his father's cherry tree and then honestly confessing, "I can't tell a lie, Pa. I did it with my hatchet." This charming tale of little George's honesty has been taught to generations of schoolchildren as a moral lesson about the virtues of integrity. Another popular myth claims Washington had wooden teeth, but that his dentures were literally made of wood, symbolizing his humble, stoic character. These anecdotes paint Washington as almost superhuman in virtue, a boy who never lied, and a leader who endured wooden teeth without complaint. The truth. Neither of these well-known Washington stories is true. The cherry tree episode was a total fabrication by an early biographer, Mason Locke Parson Weems, who was determined to illustrate Washington's sterling character. Weems first published Life of Washington in 1800, shortly after Washington's death, but the cherry tree story didn't appear until the book's 5th edition in 1806. In other words, it was a later edition, essentially an invented parable to teach kids about honesty. There's no historical record from Washington's own time that this ever happened. Similarly, Washington's teeth were not made of wood. That's a myth arising from a mix of misunderstanding and perhaps a bit of metaphor. Washington did wear dentures, but his various sets of false teeth were made from materials like hippopotamus ivory, human and cow teeth, and metal springs, not wood. These myths endure because they capture something symbolic: Washington as unfailingly honest and enduring hardship. The irony is that we honor Washington's honesty with a fabricated story. The real George Washington was indeed known for personal integrity, but he was also human. He told lies when tact required, and though he didn't chop down that cherry tree, he did cut down enemy lines and political obstacles in the fight to establish a nation. We don't need apocryphal tales to appreciate Washington's character or achievements. So while "I cannot tell a lie" makes for a neat legend, let's not lie to ourselves. It's pure myth-making. Grigory Rasputin, the mystical Russian holy man who gained influence over the last Tsar's family, has a death story so outrageous it's become the stuff of legend. According to lore, Rasputin proved practically impossible to kill. In December 1916, a group of nobles conspired to murder him and reportedly went to insane lengths. They invited Rasputin to a palace and fed him cakes and wine laced with cyanide enough to kill several men. Yet Rasputin showed no ill effect. Panicking, they shot him in the chest at close range and he collapsed, only to suddenly revive and attack his assailants with demonic fury. The terrified conspirators then shot him multiple times, including once in the forehead, and beat him bloody. Remarkably, the legend says Rasputin still wasn't quite dead. They bound him in cloth and dumped him through the ice into the freezing Neva River. When Rasputin's body was found, water in his lungs supposedly indicated he was still alive and struggling underwater before finally drowning. This gruesome saga of poison, bullets, and drowning paints Rasputin as an almost supernatural figure, the mad monk who refused to die. It's an incredible story that has been retold in countless books and even a catchy 1970s disco song, Ra Ra Rasputin, which portrays him as Russia's love machine and hints at his occult aura. The truth. Rasputin's murder did happen, but the fanciful details of his near invincibility are greatly exaggerated, largely by one of his killers. Modern historians who have studied the evidence, including autopsy reports and the testimonies, conclude that Rasputin was shot to death and likely died much sooner than the myth suggests. Here's what really went down. One of the conspirators, Prince Felix Yusupov, published a dramatic memoir afterward describing Rasputin surviving poison and multiple attacks. But no poison was actually found in Rasputin's system according to the official autopsy. It's quite possible Yusupov either never put the cyanide in the food, or Rasputin, known to avoid sweets, never consumed enough to matter. The autopsy showed no water in Rasputin's lungs, meaning he did not drown. He was already dead when dumped in the river. The cause of death was a gunshot wound to the head at close range, execution style. In all likelihood, the conspirators shot Rasputin at least once, then finished him off with a final bullet to the forehead. In reality, Rasputin was a tough, sturdy peasant, but he was mortal. There's no concrete evidence of any supernatural resilience. Once shot fatally, he died like any man would. Of course, the truth hasn't stopped the myth. Rasputin's unkillable reputation remains, making him a cult figure. Cleopatra VII, the famous last queen of ancient Egypt, has been immortalized as a stunning femme fatale who ended her life with an asp, Egyptian cobra, biting her breast in a melodramatic suicide. The classic story, popularized by Shakespeare and Hollywood, goes that after her lover Mark Antony dies, the despairing Cleopatra smuggles a venomous snake into her chamber and allows it to bite her, choosing death over humiliation by the Romans. Additionally, Cleopatra's legend portrays her as an unparalleled beauty, whose physical allure bewitched Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. For centuries, people have fixated on Cleopatra's seductive looks and that iconic snakebite imagery. The truth. Cleopatra's real story is far more complex, and the circumstances of her death remain shrouded in uncertainty. Ancient sources like Plutarch did write that she died from a snake's venomous bite, but even Plutarch admitted, "The truth of the matter no one knows." Modern historians suspect the snake suicide tale may be more legend than fact. Practical issues cast doubt on it. It's quite difficult to get a snake to bite on command, and there's even a low success rate of fatal envenomation from a single asp bite. It's entirely possible Cleopatra actually took a fast-acting poison to end her life, and the Cobra story was a bit of self-crafted theater, a dramatic final act to ensure she went out on her own terms. Some scholars believe Cleopatra might have left a note mentioning the asp to create a lasting legend about herself. As for her famed beauty, that too has been exaggerated by myth. Contemporary accounts note that Cleopatra's physical looks were not her main weapon. It was her intelligence, charisma, and linguistic skill that truly captivated those around her. Coins and busts show a woman with a prominent nose and a strong profile, not a Hollywood-style glamazon. Roman propaganda portrayed her as a promiscuous harlot queen to diminish her political savvy. In reality, Cleopatra spoke at least 9 languages and was highly educated. Her relationships with Caesar and Antony were as much about political alliance as romance. So, while Cleopatra certainly cultivated an image of divine, seductive power, the real Cleopatra impressed people with her wit and presence more than just a pretty face. And that famous asp? It makes for a sensational story, but the jury is out on whether that's truly how the Queen of the Nile met her end. Picture a Viking warrior, and you probably imagine a burly Norseman with a horned helmet, roaring into battle. This image is everywhere, from cartoons and costumes to NFL team mascots. The horned Viking helmet is an instantly recognizable symbol of the ferocious barbaric raider of the Middle Ages. It's as if Viking warriors all strapped cattle horns to their heads before ransacking a village. It's a dramatic visual that's persisted for well over a century. The truth. Nope, actual Vikings did not wear horned helmets in battle. Archaeologists have found zero evidence of horn-adorned Viking helmets from the Viking Age. In fact, only one complete authentic Viking helmet has ever been discovered, the Geirmundbu helmet, and it has no horns at all. These theatrical, fanciful designs caught the public's imagination. The myth was further fueled by the discovery of ancient horned helmets that predated the Vikings by over 2,000 years. But those belonged to Bronze Age cultures and were likely ceremonial. In reality, horns would be impractical in combat. They'd snag on things and make helmets heavier. Viking warriors wanted effective protection, not cosplay. Interestingly, the Viking horn trope became so entrenched that it's now basically a pop culture icon. So next time you see a horned Viking helmet, remember, it's about as historical as a Viking wearing a superhero cape. From Napoleon's height to Disney's deep freeze, these myths show how history and legend get tangled together. Often a myth sticks because it offers a simple, dramatic narrative, something catchy that reinforces what people want to believe about a famous figure. Napoleon's enemies wanted to belittle him, literally. Washington's admirers wanted a moral anecdote for children. Rasputin's killers wanted to hype their triumph over evil. Over time, repetition makes the myth feel like truth. In the age of movies, memes, and the internet, these legends only spread further. After all, fake news is hardly a new phenomenon. Yet debunking these myths doesn't make history boring. Quite the opposite. The real stories are richer and more human. Learning that Einstein was actually a brilliant student, or that Vikings didn't need horned hats to be intimidating, gives us a clearer picture of the past. It shows that great figures weren't cartoon characters. They were complex people often caught in the spin of their contemporaries or later storytellers. Understanding the truth behind the myth can be just as fascinating as the myth itself. For instance, knowing the British used cartoons as a weapon against Napoleon teaches us about the power of storytelling and shaping reputation. So the next time you hear a historical anecdote that sounds a bit too perfect or outrageous, give it a second thought. It might just be another myth in the making. As curious history buffs, we should keep asking, is that really true? Remember, the word history contains the word story, and stories can evolve into legends if we're not careful. By separating fact from fiction, we not only give credit to the real people behind the legends, but we also appreciate how legends themselves come to be. What other historical myths have you heard? Feel free to share your favorites in the comments. Let's compare notes on which tall tales fooled us. If you enjoyed having these myths busted, be sure to check out our other videos. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay epic and extraordinary.